my book is a collection of essays called It's Not About the Burqa, and it's an anthology that 17 different Muslim women contributed to, talking about identity, racism, sexuality, mental health, and so much more. And so when I talk about being uncomfortable when you're reading and being challenged, so my essay in the book is, so even though I edited the book, I wrote an essay, and my essay in the book is called Feminism Needs to Die. And a lot of people are challenged by that title because, like, what the hell does she mean, feminism needs to die? And essentially what I mean by that is, I mean that feminism needs to be more, it needs to die as it exists at the moment, because at the moment a certain woman dominates feminism. It's white women, white middle class women, straight women. And what I mean by it needing to die is it needs to die so women like you and like me, women from all sorts of backgrounds with different sexualities, who see themselves as women, who believe they have agency, who believe they have power, who are empowered, they can sit at that table and be like, I'm a feminist, and not be questioned. Often people look at me and they think, she can't be a feminist, she wears hijab, she wears a scarf. And I think, how reductive is that narrative? So when I say people need to be challenged and people need to feel uncomfortable, people often don't get challenged for the reductive views they have of women. And I want to do that challenging. And a lot of women in the book have done that challenging as well.
So with Feminism Needs to Die, with the idea that you put forward, the thought, the observation that you have put forward now, that feminism has become something that is closed off in a prison that is dominated by white women. Blue eyes, the tall Caucasian lady, but it does not include a subaltern, you, me. So, is it so that feminism itself is becoming something that has a gatekeeping going on with it, where there is a stop if you're associated with a certain symbol, and you're only allowed to be in if you fit into certain salient features?
So for me, very much the thing that I'm incredibly empowered by is a lot of people believe that feminism came from the West. I think that if we look far back enough, we will see that there's feminism in a lot of other cultures. Specifically speaking, in Islam, and looking at the Prophet's wives and how empowered they were business owners, they fought in wars. They were incredibly, at the very conception of Islam, these women were being incredible. So nobody had to empower them. And so when we talk about feminism, we're really talking about like not an entirely aged concept. And so yes, there is this gatekeeping. I would say more hierarchy. That's the word that I would use. I would say that in society there is this hierarchy. And to give you a very quick rundown, it's white men, white women, men of color, women of color. And then it's more complex when you add in gender or genders and that spectrum of gender and different experiences. But generally speaking, those are the people who are keeping in check. And the people dominating are white men and white women. And often what white women want to do is they want to be as close to power, as close to white men. So what happens is, to keep themselves a bit higher than everyone else, they have certain values that they portray. And if you don't embody those values, you're not empowered. You're not a feminist like them. You're not a woman like them. And if you're not like them, then they can't understand your empowerment. And that's the thing that I find incredibly frustrating. So the book talks about many different things, but my essay is about my frustration with how feminism has been co-opted. Because when you think of feminism, you think of all women, and it only represents some. And I'm done with that feminism. And so how I conclude my essay, I talk about how, well, if you want to be a feminist and you want to sit at this table that everyone's sitting at, great. And if you want to be a feminist and you want to exclude everyone, then we're just going to not engage with you, and we're going to create this table where we're all sitting, where we're all equal, or equal in the way that we can be individual and be different too. So, yeah.
Talking about the discourse about how there is this selectivity going on around everywhere, and how you identify yourself. And today you attended this session for the identity session, and you were asking some questions regarding it. How would you associate the feminism that you take in, the one that you are receptive to, with your identity as a Muslim woman as well, as a woman?
I was talking about this earlier as well, because often when we talk about identity, I believe personally that I can't exist in my identity without having politics attached to me. And inherently, politics is attached to me, whether it's as a Muslim, whether it's as a woman, or in any other way as well.
There's always a grand narrative.
There is always that, that sort of wider narrative. And so how I navigate that identity is literally by living it and shouting about it, because I think a lot of us have minimized ourselves for a long time, and for me, even in my book, and even when they were talking on stage in that specific panel that you're talking about, they talked about how, regardless of it being a sense of this responsibility and sometimes potentially a burden to be the person to be like, hey, no, it's not like that, it's like this, or some of it's like this, because the reason why my book is a collection of essays was because I was afraid that if I wrote a book by one Muslim woman, people would read it and think all Muslim women are like that one Muslim woman. And I thought, what's the one thing that I can do that as soon as someone opens this book, they think, oh wait, there's so many different ways to be a Muslim woman. And I genuinely wanted that to be the first challenge, or maybe the second after It's Not About the Burqa being the title. And I thought, well, what's that one way that I can make someone just look at the contents page and be like, oh my God, so many different ways to be a Muslim woman, so many different backgrounds, so many different practice. And that's what I think is missing at the moment in identity. When we talk about people, often we're generalized and stereotyped. And again, coming back to who has control in society and why that's done, people are put into groups because it's easy to control people.
When you put people in boxes, you can always know what their features are.
Yeah, instead of saying, Muslim women, have a diverse identity. Muslim women are traditionally submissive. Muslim women are not empowered. Muslim women are oppressed. Those are the narratives that then start to perpetuate and dominate a narrative around those identities, and they become easier to control.
You were in a panel titled Sex and the City.
Yes.
Very bold and very much fun. There was this palpable chemistry between all you panelists today. It was lovely to see that all come to it. So one thing that really caught me in that session was women writing about sex. In the current miasma, or since when women have been writing about sex, there is a perceived notion that whenever a woman writes about sex, it has to be related with some grand narrative of romance or love, or it has to be something empathetic or with this sentiment attached to it. How are you planning, or how do you see writers breaking stereotypes and coming out of those boxes in present time?
So very much in the book, in It's Not About the Burqa, sex is written about, throughout kind of thing. It's obviously it's an intertwined narrative. You can't live your life absent of it. But the most not graphic, I think, or most explicit narrative within the book is written by an amazing woman called Salma El-Wadani, and she basically, her essay is titled Agenda Divided, and she talks about pleasure in sex and how we need to educate women, and how sex is used as a tool by the patriarchy to control. And I think that very much, as you said, and I mentioned this on the panel as well, because it seemed it needed to be brought up, that often when we think of sex and when we talk about women writing about sex, we make it like, oh, women need that romantic, that we sensationalize it almost. But
it's a fetishization.
Yeah, it's a
lots of emotions right there.
Right. But then and when men are doing it, it's more like noble, that it's more bodies and and I just think that it's absurd. Like, they're writing fiction. They can do if you can believe in dragons, you can believe that a woman can write more than just in love, romantic. If your imagination stretches to dragons and Harry Potter, you can believe a woman can write in more than one way when she's writing about sex.
That's the best quote I've ever heard. So, one last question for you before we end this. So, going back to that term, where about reading, what makes you uncomfortable? What challenges you? What have you been reading recently that has challenged you and made you uncomfortable?
That's a very good question. What was the last book that I read? The last book I read I really enjoyed, but it wasn't necessarily challenging. It was more of an education and very funny. I can't think of the last book that I read on the spot. Let me have a little think. I think that when I read I've read a lot of nonfiction in the last 2 years, obviously, and I think that I don't think I'm necessarily. I am challenged. Even when I was writing It's Not About the Burqa, I was challenged by it. And I'll tell you why. It's because even though we don't believe we have parameters to our understanding and our empathy and our compassion, we do. And I think that when I was going into It's Not About the Burqa, I was really scared that I would make the book a version of Mariam's version of Muslim women, or the acceptable version of Muslim women. And I remember, and I remember having a conversation with a really great friend of mine and saying, I'm really scared I'll make this book like this, or like someone will write something and I don't agree with it. And he was like, all along you have told me that you want to create a book that disagrees with itself. There's opinions in the book which conflict with each other, and that's exactly what I wanted, because Muslim women don't always agree, and in practice, in culture, in our values, we disagree with each other. And he was like, "This is exactly what you wanted. This is what you told me when you were putting the yeah. You wanted this diversity and this depth to Muslim women, that we're not a monolith, that there's a diversity to us." So I would think that I am challenged by the books. I can't really think of anything else. But how I'm going to answer your question is to say that the biggest challenge for me in the last sort of year was when I was putting together It's Not About the Burqa, was to challenge my own understanding of what it was to be a Muslim woman. And I think that if we're all open, and I really went into it with an open heart, thinking, I'm not going to be that person who puts restrictions on how to be a Muslim woman, because that's exactly what this book is showing, that you can be a Muslim woman in so many different ways. There you go.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful interview. It was wonderful talking with you, and it was dynamic. It was a new learning experience. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.